Good morning, everybody. Welcome to week 7 of British literature. This week we are going to cover the Brownings. That includes both Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her husband, Robert Browning. And then we're going to start our look at the Industrial Revolution, which was a very, very tumultuous time in not only British history, but world history, and that includes the United States. So this way of life that we have now was made possible by industrialism. But what I want you to bear in mind as you go through the industrialism readings is that it came at a very, very high human cost. And the rich got richer, the rich industrialists, I should say, got richer at the expense and off the sweat and the hard labor of those that worked for them. And this is something that today we have the labor debate going on as well, with laws in the workplace and things like minimum wage and workplace safety and laws like that industrialists want repealed, but people have fought very, very hard for and very, very hard to keep. And these readings, hopefully this week and next week, might give you an idea of how bad industrialism was in its very beginning, so you'll know why labor unions formed and tried to fight so hard. In fact, they fought with blood and weapons and so forth in order to get better working conditions that you're going to enjoy when you get out of college, such as the 40-hour work week and such as getting paid overtime wages for overtime work and a lot of other things. So starting with the Brownings, I wanted to do this last week because of Saturday being Valentine's Day this past Saturday. And I hope you all had a good Valentine's Day if you have a sweetie to celebrate it with. But Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning were celebrities, and they were very popular, and their love story is a very, very good one. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was the celebrity, and Robert Browning was a nobody. In fact, she was actually Elizabeth Barrett. And she had an overbearing father who did not want her to marry. But she wrote poetry and she was becoming famous. And Robert Browning, who hadn't really become famous yet, wrote her a little fan letter that got her attention. And she ended up having a correspondence with him. And eventually they eloped because her father would never approve the marriage. So they eloped and they ended up getting married, and it ended up being a lifelong marriage. In fact, they would have kids and do the whole family thing, which is what a marriage should be about. So for your Valentine's Day fix, if you didn't get enough last Saturday, we've got Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnet from the Portuguese, sonnet number 43. Now, she did that because these were love poems and sometimes they could get risque, so they said, well, let's say that they're from Portugal instead of from England, just so it takes away the scandal of it. And as it turns out, I don't think that the Brownings ever went to Portugal, and the poems certainly didn't come from Portugal. Remember what a sonnet is when you read these. These are 14-line poems, 3 quatrains followed by a couplet. The couplet usually turns it on its head. And the sonnet number 43 has the very famous line, "How do I love thee, let me count the ways." So if you've heard that before, like in a Bugs Bunny cartoon or something, it came from sonnet number 43 from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And she and Robert Browning, I think, had just gotten married when she published sonnet number 43. Many of the earlier sonnets, they weren't married yet. They were love poems from a distance. But by the time she gets to 43, I think we get to where Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning were already married. All right, and then we got The Last Duchess by Robert Browning. And this is an important poem because it has something that we call a dramatic monologue. What a dramatic monologue is, and you can look through the slideshow. In fact, look through all my slideshows anytime you do a reading. When you look through the slideshow of the Brownings, you're going to find that a dramatic monologue is basically one character speaking, and the reader does not hear what the other character is saying. So we have to assume, based upon the reactions of the reader we're reading, what it is that the person that we're not hearing said. So think about this as our narrator like answers questions, or our narrator says, "Hey, look at this over here," or something like that. The Last Duchess is basically based on a true story. In fact, a lot of Browning's dramatic monologues were based upon true historical characters. And what's happening in The Last Duchess is there is this Duke who is he's talking to a broker, a marriage broker, in order to negotiate the terms of him marrying a lady. This was not uncommon in Italy, which is where this poem takes place, back in the Renaissance period. So, here we have this Duke who's already a widower because his first wife died. And as you read The Last Duchess, picture, if you will, that there is some suspicion that he actually killed her, that he might have murdered her because she was disobedient. So, and not only disobedient, but because she had a wandering eye. She actually liked, the fine lines of a handsome young man as he walked by while she was married to this Duke. So there is, even though there's no evidence that she ever committed adultery, there is the jealousy issue that is suggested here. So he's telling the broker, these are my terms, and this is what I expect from a duchess, as they are looking at a painting of the last duchess, the one that he had been married to. And again, we only get what the Duke is saying. We don't get the broker's words. So remember that when you read when you read My Last Duchess. And then Elizabeth Barrett's Cry of the Children goes back to the Industrial Revolution. And this again is child labor. And so your readings, we have got, I want you to read the introduction to industrialism. And then we've got Thomas Babington Macaulay's review of Southeast Colloquies. Picture this. This is a discussion that's going on in the United States right now. Here we have numbers that are showing Wall Street is exploding. Corporate profits are up. Unemployment is down a little bit. The country is thriving. All these industries are thriving. Therefore, the country is doing well. And yet, we have this issue where there's still a lot of poverty in the United States. And there's still a lot of people who are barely scraping by. People who are worried about their power being shut off or being evicted from their homes because they can't make their mortgages or their rent. Remember that as you're reading Macaulay's review here, because he's going to make the argument, again, that Southey is making the argument that, hey, you know what? We need to go back to a rural time, and Macaulay's going to make the argument, oh, no, this is not true. We actually need to embrace industrialism and, not listen to all these naysayers that say that there's all this bad about it and that there are people that are suffering because the numbers say otherwise. So that's what you remember there. Then you've got the Children's Employment Commission, and you will be horrified at the working conditions that these children had to endure in the mines that they worked in. In fact, they are very horrifying. And when you read this, your heart will go out to these children. And remember this. In fact, what I would do, I would wait and read Elizabeth Barrett Browning's, even though it's listed first on your syllabus. I would read Elizabeth Barrett Browning's The Cry of the Children last. I would read the Employment Commission first, because that commission report that you're going to read a piece of is what inspired Cry of the Children. And art actually does help bring about change. The Cry of the Children then led to the passage of child labor laws because of what she describes in that poem, especially from the point of view of a child who is suffering. So here's what I would do. I would read the Sonnet 43 and The Last Duchess first. Then I would go into the industrialism part, and especially the Children's Employment Commission. Then, even though I've got it listed first, I would actually read The Cry of the Children last, after you've read the Employment Commission's report, and see what Elizabeth Barrett Browning is writing against, what inspired her to write this poem. And then remember that her poem helped bring about positive social change because child labor laws were passed and such shortly after that. So that's all I've got for this week's readings. I haven't graded your most recent postings yet, which I believe are on Lord Byron and Percy Shelley. And, of course, last week's posting, even though not many of you had posted last week's posting by about 10 o'clock last night. I think only 5 of you had. But I haven't gotten to those yet, but I will soon. And then we can move forward with these readings. So I hope you enjoy the Brownings. I hope that the industrialism readings will help open your eyes to the painful changes that were brought about by industrialism back in the birth of the Industrial Revolution. And with that in mind, I hope you have a good week. Feel free to contact me either through the D2L email or call me during my office hours or drop by and visit my office during office hours. I met one of my online students last Saturday that I had never met before, and it was nice to actually get to talk to a human being rather than talk through an email. So if you're on campus, and I know that's not true of all of you, I know many of you are not, but if you're on campus, stop by and say hi, and we'll talk to you soon.